They laughed at my wedding. Not loudly. Not in a way anyone else noticed. It was quieter than that. The kind of laughter that lives in glances, in smirks exchanged when they think you're too distracted to see. The kind that doesn't echo through the room, but stays lodged in your chest long after the music fades. I saw it when I walked down the aisle. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, like she was holding something back. My sister leaned toward my aunt and whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. My cousin raised his eyebrows, amused. They didn't think this marriage would last. They didn't think I would last. And before I tell you how everything unraveled, before the silence in that room turned heavy, before the truth finally spoke louder than any of them ever had, let me introduce myself. My name is Lauren Whitmore. And if you're listening to this right now, tell me where you're watching from. Leave it in the comments, because for a long time, I thought I was alone in this story. I grew up in a family where expectations were clear, even when no one said them out loud. You were valuable if you were impressive. You were lovable if you were useful. And you were invisible if you didn't fit the picture they wanted to show the world. My older sister, Claire, fit that picture perfectly. She was loud, confident, effortlessly charming. She walked into rooms like she belonged there, like the air rearranged itself for her comfort. Me? I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the one they called when something needed to be handled, paid for, organized, or smoothed over. Not because they respected me, but because they trusted I wouldn't say no. You're just better with details, Lauren, my mother used to say. What she really meant was, you'll carry this so we don't have to. By the time I was 25, I had already helped my parents refinance their house, covered my sister's rent when she fell on hard times, handled medical bills no one wanted to talk about. I didn't complain. I thought that was what love looked like. Then I met Daniel. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't make grand entrances or talk about himself like the world owed him applause. He listened. The first time I brought him to a family dinner, I watched the way my relatives sized him up. The way their smiles tightened when he talked about his job. The way my uncle asked what his backup plan was, as if a person's worth could be measured by how easily he could be impressed. Later that night, my sister pulled me aside. "Are you serious about him?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "I am," I said. She laughed, just a little. "Lauren, you could do better." That was the first time it happened. Not the first time they doubted me, but the first time they did it openly. When Daniel proposed, my mother cried, but her tears didn't feel like joy. They felt like disappointment wrapped in politeness. "You're sure this is what you want?" she asked. Not "I'm happy for you," not "congratulations," just doubt. The wedding planning was complicated. Not because Daniel and I wanted anything extravagant. We didn't. We chose a small venue, simple flowers, a short guest list. But my family treated the whole thing like an inconvenience. My mother criticized the dress. My sister questioned the guest list. My aunt asked, more than once, if we'd thought about postponing. Still, I smiled. I stayed calm. I told myself that once the day came, once they saw how serious this was, how committed we were, they'd finally respect me. I was wrong. On the morning of the wedding, as I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my dress, my phone buzzed. A message from my sister. "Just so you know, people are taking bets on how long this lasts." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I locked my phone. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't tell anyone. I walked down that aisle with my head high, even as I felt the weight of every unspoken judgment pressing in on me. And when I reached the altar, when Daniel took my hands and smiled at me like I was the only person in the room, something inside me steadied. Because whatever they thought, I knew one thing they didn't. I knew the truth. And the truth was patient. It waited through the ceremony, through the applause, through the polite hugs and forced congratulations. It waited through dinner, through the speeches, and when it finally spoke, through the laughter. It spoke louder than any of them ever had. The reception was held in a renovated estate just outside the city. White lights wrapped around old trees, soft music floating through the air, champagne glasses clinking like everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. On the surface, it was beautiful. Underneath, it was tense. I noticed it when my mother gave her toast. She smiled. Everyone smiled back. But her words were careful, curated. "She's always been independent," she said, pausing slightly before my name, like she was choosing the safest adjective available. "And Daniel has supported her decisions. Supported, not loved, not chosen. Supported, like you support a risky investment." Polite laughter followed. I caught my sister's eye across the room. Claire lifted her glass and winked, the same way she always did when she thought she was winning something. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded. I was more than okay, because while they were laughing, whispering, betting on my future like it was entertainment, something else was happening quietly behind the scenes, something they never thought to ask about. See, 6 months before the wedding, my father had a health scare. Nothing dramatic. Not at first, just enough to require tests, then more tests, then procedures that insurance only partially covered. My parents never asked me for help directly. They never had to. They just started hinting. "We're stretched a bit," my mother said one afternoon, sighing dramatically over coffee. "It's just temporary," my father added, "until things stabilize." So I stepped in, paid hospital bills, covered medication costs, handled follow-up appointments, quietly, discreetly, just like I always had. What they didn't realize was that those payments weren't just generosity. They were documentation, records, and eventually, leverage. A few weeks before the wedding, my sister came to me with a smile that felt rehearsed. "We're thinking of upgrading the reception," she said. "Just a few small changes." I asked how they planned to pay for it. She waved a hand dismissively. "Mom said you'd figure it out." That was the moment something clicked. Not snapped, clicked. I smiled back and said, "I'll see what I can do." And I did. I reviewed everything. Every shared account, every recurring payment, every expense that quietly flowed through me instead of them. That night, Daniel watched me work at the kitchen table, spreadsheets open, documents sorted into folders. "You're planning something," he said gently. "I'm planning clarity," I replied. The wedding day came and went in a blur of expectations and half-hearted approval. But the real moment didn't happen during the ceremony. It happened after dessert, after the dancing, after most guests had relaxed enough to stop pretending. My uncle leaned toward my sister at the bar. "So," he said, not whispering quite enough, "how long do you give it?" She laughed. "Longer than she deserves," she replied. I heard it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I stood. I walked to the center of the room, and I asked the DJ for the microphone. Quieted, not because they expected anything important, but because they were curious. I smiled. "I wasn't planning on speaking," I said. "But since everyone has been so invested in my marriage tonight, I thought I'd share something." My mother stiffened. My sister frowned. Daniel stayed right where he was, calm, steady, watching me with quiet trust. "I just want to thank my family," I continued, "for teaching me something very valuable." People leaned in. "For years," I said, "I believed love meant sacrifice without boundaries. That being useful was the same as being valued." A murmur moved through the crowd. But today, I added, I realized something else. I paused. The people who laugh when you step into happiness are usually standing on something you built. Silence. Heavy now. Uncomfortable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply reached into my clutch and pulled out a folder. I've been handling my parents' medical expenses for the past year, I said evenly. Every bill, every payment, every follow-up. My mother stood abruptly. That is not appropriate. And, I continued calmly, I've also been covering several other family expenses that no one here seemed too concerned about. Gasps. My sister's smile vanished. My father stared at the floor. I don't say this for applause, I said. I say it because tonight, laughter turned into entitlement. I closed the folder. So I've made a decision. I looked at my parents. Starting tomorrow, I won't be managing or funding anything outside my own household. A beat. Daniel stepped beside me, took my hand. The room felt different now. Not shocked. Aware. This isn't punishment, I finished. It's balance. I handed the microphone back and walked away. Behind me, whispers erupted, questions. Realizations. The laughter didn't return because the truth had spoken, and it didn't need to shout. The calls started before we even left the venue. My phone buzzed once, then again, then 3 times in a row. I didn't look. Daniel noticed. They're not done, he said quietly. I know, I replied, but neither am I. The drive home felt unreal, like stepping out of a storm into a room where the air finally made sense. No noise, no pressure. Just the hum of the road and the quiet understanding between 2 people who had chosen each other deliberately. When we walked through the door, I kicked off my heels and leaned against the wall, letting the weight of the night settle. I didn't plan that speech, I admitted. Daniel smiled softly. You didn't need to. It was already written. The next morning, reality arrived with coffee and confrontation. My mother called first. I let it ring. Then my sister. Then my father. Finally, a message appeared. We need to talk. This went too far. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back. I agree. We do. We met 2 days later at my parents' house, the same living room where I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit whatever mood filled the space. This time, I sat straight. My mother paced. My sister crossed her arms. My father stayed silent. You humiliated us, my mother said, voice tight. In front of everyone. I nodded once. Yes, and you laughed at me in front of everyone first. That was a joke, my sister snapped. You're too sensitive. I looked at her calmly. No, you're just used to me absorbing it. She scoffed. You think paying a few bills gives you the right to act superior? I reached into my bag and placed a printed folder on the table. I don't think, I said. I know. My father finally looked up. What is this? He asked. Every payment I've made for this family in the past 18 months, I replied. Medical bills, insurance gaps, emergency transfers, renovation costs, credit card balances. My mother's face paled. You kept records, she whispered. Yes, I said simply, because one day, I knew I'd need proof that I wasn't imagining things. Silence swallowed the room. My sister flipped through the pages, her confidence draining with every line. This is a lot, she muttered. It is, I agreed, and it ends here. My mother sat down heavily. You could have told us, she said. I met her eyes. I did, every time I was dismissed, every time I was laughed at, every time my needs came second. My father cleared his throat. We didn't realize how much you were carrying, he said, I know, I replied. That's the problem. My sister pushed the folder back. So what now? She asked. You just cut us off. I step back, I corrected. You step up, or you don't. But I won't bleed quietly anymore. My mother's voice cracked. You're changing. Yes, I said. I am. And for the first time, no one argued. The weeks that followed were uncomfortable. Boundaries always are. My parents stumbled through bills they'd never managed alone. My sister discovered how fast admiration fades when convenience disappears. And me, I slept. Deeply. Peacefully. I stopped checking my phone compulsively. Stopped apologizing for taking space. Stopped explaining myself. One evening, as Daniel and I sat on the balcony watching the city settle into night, he asked me something that surprised me. Do you miss them? He said. I thought about it. I miss who I thought they were, I said honestly, not who they chose to be. He nodded. That was enough. Months later, my father called again. This time, I answered. I just wanted to say thank you, he said quietly. Not for the money, but for making us see. I closed my eyes. You're welcome, I said. But seeing doesn't mean fixing. I know, he replied. We're trying. When the call ended, I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. Because the truth didn't just speak at my wedding, it stayed. And the laughter, it never came back. Because once the truth speaks, everything else has to listen. The last time I wore my wedding dress, it wasn't for photos. It was weeks later, standing alone in our bedroom, sunlight cutting softly across the floor. I hadn't planned to put it on again. I just wanted to remember who I was before that night, and who I became after it. The woman in the mirror looked different, not louder, not colder, just steadier. People assume revenge is loud, shouting, chaos, public collapse, but the most powerful kind is quiet. It's when you stop explaining, when you stop shrinking, when you let the truth stand on its own feet and walk into the room without you holding its hand. I didn't lose my family that night. I lost the version of myself that believed love meant endurance without limits. Some of them still don't speak to me. Some do, carefully, like they're learning a new language. And some only remember me now when the laughter has consequences. But I don't replay that moment anymore, because I don't need to. The truth already did what it came to do. It didn't humiliate. It didn't scream. It didn't beg. It simply stood there, undeniable. And once it spoke, louder than any of them ever laughed, I finally heard myself. And that voice, that one stays, forever.